Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, also known as Major Green, and today I want to talk about the Picard series and I want to ask the question, will any of the other actors from TNG appear in the Picard series and should they appear and how can we bring some of them back and how it all should be done in my opinion. So first of all, let's talk about the obvious. Most of these actors did not age that well, as you can see in some of these pics, and I'm not trying to be mean to any of these actors. I really love them. I grew up on that show, and I personally wouldn't mind seeing all of them, but I know that the studios, the producers will not want to show like old people on the screen, so this will probably not be a TNG reunion. Maybe we'll have a few more cameos by some of the others, but according to all the rumors, it will be primarily about Picard and probably a whole bunch of new characters, younger characters. When I first heard about this new project, I feared that Patrick Stewart will also just get a cameo, but apparently he's going to be the main character, so that's a good thing. I am really happy about that. I really hope they don't screw this up. But I do think at least some of the other TNG actors should appear at least a little bit. I don't think we shouldn't see any of them. That would feel like a missed opportunity if we don't see anyone else from that time period in Star Trek except for Picard. So I do think some more actors should appear. The most problematic is Brent Spiner because first of all we saw his character Data being killed off in the last time we saw him in Nemesis. They did put a way to bring him back with that other android before. And I think in the Star Trek comics they did bring Data back, meaning before became Data again. So Data is alive in the Star Trek universe in the future, so we can bring him back and we should bring him back, but how can we explain his appearance? Because obviously the actor is much older and he's supposed to be an android, so seeing an elderly android on screen would be kind of strange. One way to explain it away is simply say that he wants to look that way, that he has an aging program, which was mentioned once in the series that androids have aging programs, like Data's android mother appeared old, and so it is possible to explain it that way. I personally think it would be better to just give him a real flesh, like say that he wanted to look completely human, and so he used the new technology to give himself real skin, just like the Borg gave him real skin, and so that would explain it. That would also spare him the need to put on heavy makeup, which the actor hated. And I was never a big fan of the makeup. I always thought that it wasn't necessary to make him that white. It would have been enough just to make him a little bit paler, just so we see he's not exactly human. I was never a huge fan of that white look, and so I wouldn't mind if they simply explain that he upgraded himself and gave himself a human appearance and that he wants to look old, like his real age. He can still look a little bit paler than normal humans, and they should make him look as good as possible on screen, but they should also explain why he looks old. I don't think using CGI is possible, it would be too expensive, and I don't want them to spend all their budgets just on that, so I'm not suggesting that, and so I think the best explanation would be to simply say that he upgraded himself with real skin, or with more human looking skin, and that he wants to look older, and so that would be the reason. Also, if you're familiar with that movie with Robin Williams in which he played an android, Bicentennial Man, it was also kind of a Data character, an android who wants to be more human, and in the end of the movie, spoilers, he receives a more human skin, and so we can do something like that with Brent Spiner. It can also give us some cool moments, if he's involved in some kind of action scene, we can maybe see some of his skin getting ripped off, and then we can see the android underneath, and so that's something I always liked seeing. Whenever Data loses parts of his body, and that can be something cool, and with today's technology it can look awesome, and so I think it should be done. Now, I don't think he should have a big part in the show, but I do think he should show up at least in one episode. That's just a must in my opinion. He was probably the favorite character from TNG, so it should be established that he's still alive, that he's even cooler now as an android, that he's even more human. And maybe they can bring in a new android character actually. Maybe they can show that Data is once again working on building a new android, his android children, and maybe we can get a new younger actor to play as a new android character. That might be a good idea, and maybe Brent Spiner can basically pass the torch to that new android, who will be a new character in the show. As for the other actors, I do think we should see some of them. Michael Dorn, I think, should have a big role in that show. Of course, he should look like the old Klingons and not the Kling orcs. That would be terrible. I think Michael Dorn said somewhere that he would refuse to wear the new Klingon makeup. So that's a good thing. He should definitely appear as a normal Klingon. Otherwise, I don't want to see him, and I don't want to see those Kling orcs in that show. That show should be as closely related to the primary timeline. Now, because there will be a time jump, I'm fine with other things changing, meaning the sets of ships, ships themselves, stuff like that. I would be much more fine with different designs since it will be in the future. Actually, if Star Trek Discovery would have been set in the future, I would have far fewer complaints about it. I would still complain about it looking ugly, but at least I would say that it makes sense that it's post the Dominion War, that everything is more militaristic and so on. So that would fix a lot of the problems. So if they do that kind of style, which I don't like, but if they do that in the Picard series, I would have less complaints since it's far in the future, so technology being more advanced would make sense. So I wouldn't complain about that, but I do hope that everything will look beautiful like it used to look like in the original Star Trek shows, most notably TNG, and especially since this is supposed to be kind of a sequel to TNG, so this should look as much in the same spirit as TNG was. In TNG always they show the ships and all the Starfleet places as looking very beautiful, like it's a place you want to be in, so I definitely think that's the style they should go for in this show as well. Do the sets pleasant to look at. It will make the show better. Make us want to be there and not to go somewhere else. But technology being more advanced, that's fine. For a change, it would make sense this time. Unlike all these prequels and reboots in which technology is more advanced in the past, which annoys fans. But in the Picard series set in the future, that would be acceptable, and that would make it easy for them to make it like 25% different or whatever they need to do because of copyright reasons. I won't get into all of that, but the Klingons should definitely look like they did in TNG. Maybe slight differences, small upgrades with makeup, that's fine, but they should remain the same spirit, the same style. Now, as for when the show is taking place, I think they'll set it like 25 years in the future, like exactly the time that passed in real life. But I think that would be a mistake. I think they should set it even far beyond that in the future for a few reasons. First of all, again, the technology being more advanced and all that kind of stuff. Just do a bigger time jump. It would be more justified to do all kinds of crazy new designs and ships and technologies. So that's number one. Number two, because the actors didn't age well, I think we should explain that away by setting it in the more distant future because they have much more advanced medical technology. So shouldn't they be aging better than they age in real life today? I mean, we saw Dr. McCoy in the future and he was like 140 years old and he was still alive. So medical technology is obviously better. Also, they have the Baku planet in Federation space, so wouldn't they all be taking vacations there, which would make them age even slower? I mean, Picard promised in the end of Insurrection, he promised that woman that he will return for a vacation there, and he said he had a 300 days vacation stored up and stuff like that. So if he would spend a year on the Baku planet, wouldn't he de-age at least a few years? And wouldn't any of the other guys ever revisit that planet, which would also make them younger? So logically it will also make sense that all these guys will age a little bit slower, and because of the medical technology being more advanced than today, and so it wouldn't actually make sense to have them age exactly as they are in real life. Also because we saw all of them in the final episode of TNG, which was set 25 years in the future after the last episode, and we saw all of them looked much better than they look like in real life. So that would be an inconsistency if we see them at the same point in time and they look much worse. So that would also be kind of a disconnect. It would be a continuity mistake in a way, and so that's why I think the show should actually be set much farther away in the future. I would put it at 40 years after the TNG show, and there's another reason I want it to be set in that time frame, and that is to allow us to see Worf's story in the future, because do you remember that episode in which Worf's son Alexander actually traveled from 40 years in the future back in time in order to change the past? Because in the future he said that there was a struggle in the Klingon Empire between the House of Duras and the House of Mog, and that Worf was killed in the future, and Alexander said that he was trying to be like an ambassador to make peace inside the Klingon Empire, and he didn't listen to Worf, and then Worf got killed. So if they set this show 40 years after the series, then we can actually see all of that. Now, I don't think Worf should die, because remember, Worf knows about what's going to happen, so he can do things differently, and so maybe he won't end up dying in this new future, but it will be interesting to see those events in the Klingon Empire. I do think the Klingon Empire should be a big player in the galaxy, because again, in all those episodes set in the future, we always hear about how the Klingon Empire again became aggressive. It was again an enemy of the Federation, that it conquered Romulus. That's a bit of a problem with the JJ story, because according to him, Romulus was destroyed. All that kind of stuff they should simply not mention, as not to create even more continuity problems. They should simply say that the Klingons conquered the Romulan Empire, And you can have a story with the Klingon Empire being more aggressive, maybe again ruled by the Duras family, because remember, not all the Duras died. Dolores said that she was pregnant in the last season, I think, of TNG, and then later both of them died in the movie Generations when Worf fired the torpedo that killed them. But what if the child was actually not on their ship at the time? Maybe he was a baby being taken care of somewhere else, and the Enterprise destroyed that Klingon bird of prey with his mother and aunt on board. So wouldn't that Klingon maybe later seek revenge? And remember, it was Worf who fired that torpedo. So maybe that person who is a Duras, maybe he's the one who will turn the Klingons again into an aggressive empire. And maybe Worf and Alexander would try to oppose that. And it doesn't have to be a long, dragged out story. It can be quickly mentioned. This can be done in one episode if it's done right. All this backstory I just mentioned can be summed up in 1 or 2 minutes, maybe told by Worf, or maybe not even told to us. Maybe the fans can connect the dots themselves. They can simply mention briefly, like, oh, that's the son of the Dura sisters. He took over the Klingon Empire. He wants revenge against Worf because Worf fired the torpedo that killed his mother and aunt. Worf can very quickly tell this whole story, and then they can do an episode or two about all of that. It would tie in nicely to the old show. It would wrap up some of those stories. That would be an opportunity to see a cameo with Worf. Maybe Alexander could be a new character with a new actor, obviously. So that might be an interesting character. And so that's another reason to set this show 40 years in the future and not just 25 years. Now, as for Picard himself, I previously suggested that when we first see him in the show, he should be in the exact same spot we saw him in the future of that last episode, working on those grapevines. Actually, now I think it wouldn't be a good idea, because again, it should be set even farther away in the future, and also because I think he changed his future after that episode, because he knew what's going to happen. Maybe he made different choices, and so maybe he didn't leave Starfleet as soon, maybe he remained in Starfleet as an admiral, maybe went into politics, stuff like that. So I actually wouldn't want to see him in those grapevines. Maybe we can see him doing some archaeology work, because that was also his hobby, that was mentioned a lot of times. So maybe it would be interesting to see him in the first episode, see him on some alien planet, digging up some ruins or something, and maybe he finds something that can be tied into the actual plot. Maybe he dug up some ancient Iconian technology or something like that, something cool, which can also tie to the actual plot of the series. Maybe that's the thing that will bring him back into the action. Maybe he spent a few years just digging some ruins. Maybe he spent a few years just invested in his archaeology work, but now suddenly he found something. Or maybe someone else calls him to that because they know he has an interest in that. And maybe they want Picard because he has a previous experience with Iconian technology. He's the only one who encountered it. So maybe someone calls him to check something out, and then it can tie to the actual plot of the series. And so I do think when we first see him, maybe he should be just digging in some ruins, looking like Indiana Jones or something. And I wouldn't mind if the first few episodes we have a little bit different Picard. As long as he returns to the real Picard a little bit later, I'd be fine with the first episode or two with him being a little bit strange or whatever. Even if he has a Iromadic syndrome, which makes him senile, that can also be interesting to see. It will make him a character with challenges. And maybe in the course of the series it can somehow be fixed, and then he can become the old Picard that we know and love. So in my opinion, the show should be set about 40 years in the future. That would explain why they all look older than you would expect, because we saw them already 25 years in the future and they look much better than they look like today. And so this is the only way to explain it always. Just set it in the more distant future. They can all still be alive, that's fine. Maybe have Picard be like 100 years old, and that would still be fine, because this is the future. It would actually be cool to see an episode with Picard's 100-year birthday, with people celebrating. Maybe that's the episode with a bunch of cameos that people that he knows send him messages or come visit him. So that would also be nice in my opinion. So it would also be nice to see Jonathan Frakes, LeVar Burton, a few of the others, maybe even from the other Star Trek shows. I mean, from Voyager, I think Jerry Ryan still looks great, by the way. I saw her in a bunch of stuff. She looks almost exactly the same, so wouldn't it be cool to see Seven of Nine appear in the Picard show, at least for an episode? We can get to know what happened with her character, how she evolved in this time, and maybe the Borg should be involved in the plot. Wouldn't it be cool to see the Borg again, maybe more advanced Borg? Maybe that's the reason Picard gets pulled out of retirement, since he has the biggest experience with the Borg. So he gets called to deal with that, maybe a new invasion by the Borg, and also Seven of Nine obviously will also have to appear. Wouldn't it be great to see some of them? I'm not expecting to see all of them, of course, but seeing a few of them I do think would be really cool. It would give the fans what they want. A lot of fans always wanted a sequel series set in the farther away future, and maybe to know what happened with some of the characters from the shows they loved. So this will be a perfect opportunity. So in my opinion, they just have to do that. At least a little bit, give something to the fans, throw them a bone, give a few of the actors, a few of the characters some closure, some continuation. So that's my opinion on all of this. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we can discuss it in the comments. If you enjoy listening, please subscribe, please like, check out my other videos in my playlists, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.